What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the Makina gaming channel. It's me, your boy Makina, coming to you with another video game review. It's been about 8 years, but we finally got the sequel to Hollow Knight that longtime fans have been waiting for. Since its first announcement back in 2019, fans like myself were patiently waiting to see just how Team Cherry would expand on the original game. I feel like this game didn't have a ton of marketing dollars behind it, but for those of us who had the chance to play the original game, we've been eagerly waiting for this game's arrival. Originally, Hollow Knight Silksong was supposed to be just DLC content, but somewhere along the line it turned into a standalone sequel, and I am not mad at it. Hollow Knight Silksong is a reminder that just because a game doesn't hold the title of being AAA, doesn't mean that you can't get a ton of value. For a point of reference, I spent a little over 55 plus hours on the game, and was incredibly surprised by just how much content they added to the game. So what exactly is Hollow Knight Silksong? I'm glad you asked. Well, it's a 2D action-adventure game that features Hornet, the formidable protector of Hollow Nest, who was one of the more mysterious characters of the original game. The game starts with Hornet's capture, and in the beginning of the game, she's brought to this distant kingdom of Farlum, a land ruled by Silk and Song, hence the name. It is there that she must start her pilgrimage upward into the Citadel to uncover the mysterious powers that overshadow the kingdom, and her goal is to try to figure out why she was captured. Throughout her journey, she runs into several different characters that all give her a bit of insight on what exactly is going on. Initially, you are tasked with traversing through the world below the Citadel, an underworld of sorts where some of the inhabitants are being enslaved to work tirelessly for this Citadel. The Haunting, as this game calls it, is cast all over the world below, which corrupts its inhabitants into serving Grandmother Silk, which was an ominous being that was hinted at throughout the whole entire game. Second in command to the Grandmother Silk are the Citadel's choir bugs, which are oppressive, they're fanatical, and they're the religious rulers of the kingdom who consider themselves to be more distinguished.
I've been teaching the disciples all week. It's nice to actually take a break and have a little fun.
Yeah. Cannibal! Religious satire aside, they reside in the Citadel itself and cast the sinners and anyone who opposes their rule to the pits of Farlum. At least that's what I was able to piece together from all the in-game dialogue that I had to read. Like many games in this space, there really wasn't a linear story to follow or any real voice acting, so instead, you piece the story together by discovering new NPCs and new areas in the game. I will say, this game's story was a bit harder to follow than some of its contemporaries though. When speaking to some of the other characters in the world, the dialogue box was a little bland to look at and had no real visual appeal. I know that might seem like a small detail to some of you guys, but if you aren't going to have any voice acting and your main way of communicating your narrative is through text, you have to at least give the game something more to look at than just words in a black box. Because of this, the dialogue came across kind of bland to me, and I found myself skipping through lots of it because some of it just seems scattered and out of place. One moment you're talking about a character that has something to do pertaining to the story, and the other, you're talking to another character about something that feels completely random. I know it's all supposed to fit together, but after understanding the initial premise, the game didn't really do anything to truly reel me back in. Now, I'm sure that there are hardcore fans out there that have probably looked way deeper into the lore than I have, but that's not to say that it was implemented well into the game, at least not in my opinion. I think they could have done a better job of giving the story a little bit more direction. Not everything has to be linear though. In fact, that's actually one of my favorite things about this game, and one of the things that I appreciate the most. The freedom to determine which path to take or a direction to go in can significantly influence how you progress through the game. In my case, for example, I find myself backtracking a ton because I was trying to truly not miss anything. It was awesome discovering secret paths within an area that then led to a much larger area. Even though at times it was kind of confusing, the discovery was just as much as part of the fun as anything else. Walking into a new area was especially interesting because in this game, you don't initially have a layout of where you are. You have to seek out Chakra, who is the NPC responsible for selling a map to the area along with some of the other items that can assist you on your journey. She's on a bit of a journey herself and is one of the game's more interesting characters. Because there were so many paths to take, finding her was sometimes tricky, but to me that was also part of the fun. Scattered throughout the world, you would come across some of these rest benches, which were checkpoints of sorts. Staying alive long enough to discover these rest benches in the game added a little bit more tension to the exploration because at times you would discover a new area, but you'd be super low on health. At the risk of not having to go all the way back to your last located rest bench, you had to be extra careful when in a new area. There was a real sense of relief every time I found a new rest bench or every time I found chakra, because this game was pretty unforgiving at times. And having to start over from a super far away point on the map was really deflating. But just like its predecessor, the sense of discovery in this game was awesome. Maybe not as incredible as in the first one, but still incredible nonetheless. Now, it's important to note that there are hazards everywhere you turn in Hollow Knight Silksong. It feels like everything is out to get you in the world of Farland. There are different traps to look out for, tons of enemies to defeat, challenging bosses to face, and difficult platforming to master. And what's crazy is that each area really feels distinct from the last one and has its own enemy types and traps to contend with. The game is already difficult enough to begin with, but gets even more difficult the more you progress, with some parts kind of being ridiculous at times. I remember Hollow Knight being a difficult game, but there are some parts in Silksong that at times even felt broken. Some of the enemy gauntlets, although satisfying, really tested my patience. They designed some of these sequences with little to no room to maneuver, which was really frustrating at times because enemy attack patterns were pretty hard to predict. Sometimes while facing some of the enemies, it felt like you were almost guaranteed to get hit because of the lack of space, which to me was a little unfair. But I gotta say, again, that it was extremely satisfying working my way through and completing these sections. The game felt pretty rewarding, and it felt very gratifying being able to beat a section that was giving me trouble. Like I said though, when it's not one thing, it's another, because the platforming in this game was also pretty challenging. You had to be really precise with your movement when traversing through the world. Countless times I found myself falling into a pit of spikes, getting hit with things falling nearby, taking damage from traps, and missing jumps left and right. With all that said though, I still have to admit that the movement in Silksong does feel more fluid than in the original. It's faster, it's smoother, and it plays into Hornet's more acrobatic persona that was portrayed in the first game. Plus, the game gives you plenty of different moves that you can utilize to get you from point A to point B. They did a great job making you faster and more agile, which is how Hornet is supposed to feel, so kudos to them for that. For sure, the movement in this game deserves an 8+. Something else that the game improved on were the boss fights. Although I had a ton of fun with the boss fights in Hollow Knight, the boss fights in Silksong seemed just better to me, offering more variety, a great challenge, and all in all, just an overall better experience. They were more plentiful too. They were really well designed for the most part, with the exception of a few of course, and felt really satisfying to beat. I will say, however, be prepared to die quite a bit before being able to fully understand how to win. Some bosses will have you fooled into thinking you won, only to have you discover that there's a second phase in which they're faster and harder to time. But all in all, mostly all the boss fights were really well designed and took full advantage of the in-game mechanics that the game had to offer. And like I said, it felt like there was a higher quantity of bosses as opposed to the last game. The developers of Team Cherry really took this opportunity to showcase their creativity because each encounter felt completely distinct from the last. Even though there was a ton of backtracking, knowing you were backtracking with a purpose and that you were going to be fighting new stuff along the way made the game feel less repetitive than it would have otherwise. But having cool stuff to fight isn't enough on its own. You have to pair that with great gameplay to really make it a complete experience. The gameplay in Hollow Knight Silksong is where I felt there were major improvements. Both this game and its predecessor had similar styles, but Team Cherry was able to take a great foundation and expand on it, even though they went in a little bit of a different direction this time. One of the key differences between the two playstyles is the charm system versus the crest system. In the original game, you used a charm system, which allowed you to equip charms to enhance your character's abilities. Abilities that ranged from enhancing spells all the way to making your character more resistant to damage. Each charm would take up notches, which were like slots. Some charms would be worth 1 notch and another would be worth 3. The game gave you a maximum of 11 notches, which meant that you had to be real selective with which charms you chose. In this game, however, you have a crest system which allows the player to equip different tools to assist with the combat. There are 3 types of tools within the game. The red tools are consumable items that you can use to assist you in combat. Think of things that you can either throw or set, like a trap, while in battle to help damage the enemy. The blue tools are somewhat like passive skills that can be used for either offense or defense, depending on your playstyle. One, for example, can protect you from damage while you're regenerating your health, while another can allow you to regenerate your health faster. The yellow tools are also passive skills that help you with exploration and maneuvering. But just how do you take advantage of this new system and the skills that you have at your disposal? Well, it depends on 2 main things. The first is finding memory lockets around the world, which is what you will use to unlock slots within a crest. Keep in mind that these are pretty rare to find, and which crest you decide to use them on is super important. The second really just depends on your playstyle and which crest you decide you want to use. You see, each crest comes with a certain amount of slots for each type of tool. Therefore, you might find yourself using a crest with 2 slots for each type of tool, or a crest that favors one type of tool over the others. There are a total of 7 different crests that you can find throughout the game, each with a different number of slots, and how you equip each crest is really up to you and how you want to approach the game. For me, I had one go-to crest throughout the whole game because it offered a more balanced approach to the gameplay. But I also found myself using other types of crests that favored more of an offensive approach for when I had to be more aggressive. There are plenty of different tools that you can buy and find throughout the world that will inevitably really open up the combat when equipped to whatever crest you choose. It's also important to note that each crest has a different skill you can take advantage of. Some of these skills are equally as important to the tools you equipped because they can give you a decent advantage in certain sections of the game. Each skill focuses on something different, and ideally you want to try to go with the one that favors your current situation within the game. With all that said, I can really tell that the developers made a conscious effort to improve the combat this time around, and it definitely shows. They went in a different direction, and to me it totally worked in this game. I think that anyone who played the original game will definitely notice some of the improvements almost immediately. One of the main things that I can truly appreciate about this game is that it really has style. There's something about this game that just makes it feel like a really unique experience. The in-game sound effects, for example, and the soundtrack gave the game a certain ambiance that I really enjoyed. Like, there was a certain mystique around it all. The world was really well designed, the platforming felt smoother and more fluid. The gameplay to me was an obvious improvement to the last game, and overall the game felt really rewarding. There were plenty of merchants scattered throughout the world ready to be discovered, which all offered distinct merchandise. The game offered plenty of different skills to take advantage of, and I really enjoyed all the different enemy encounters, no matter how frustrating at times. I will say that the game doesn't really deliver the type of narrative that kept me invested or engaged with the story, and most of that probably had to do with how it was that they decided to tell the story. It just felt a little scattered to me. Certain boss fights and sections were also poorly designed. The lack of space to maneuver and some of the enemy attacks just felt a little ridiculous at times. And again, even though the enemies were cool, having to fight them almost felt too frustrating at times. Guys, it's also worth mentioning that this game also gives you plenty of quests to keep you busy. Most of them aren't really memorable though and feel more like fetch quests. You know the type, gather this, deliver that. Luckily though, these don't seem to be too overwhelming because after completing a couple here and there, you won't have more till much later in the game. Sometimes they were a welcomed break though, because it was while doing some of these quests that I found myself going back to areas only to discover things that I missed earlier in the game. I also have to comment on the game's final boss. The whole fight just felt a little underwhelming to me, and beating the final boss didn't really deliver like it was supposed to, at least not to me. It only took me a couple of tries to beat her, which, you know, for a final boss is kind of disappointing in a way because there was a ton of stuff within the game that gave me way more trouble, and that was cooler. I didn't really know what to expect towards the end, but I definitely did expect more than that. With that said though, evidently my ending was only one of many. The ending that I got was the standard ending. Apparently you can unlock a whole third act that leads to a totally different ending. The true ending, as some of the forums put it. Now I won't spoil that ending here, but in total, just so you guys know, the game has 6 different endings. On one hand, It's pretty cool knowing that there were alternate paths that I could have taken that would have influenced the story differently. But on the other hand, when I discovered this after the fact, it just kind of pissed me off because ultimately I was expecting more with the ending, and I didn't get that emphatic moment that would have really made the game much more worthwhile. For those reasons, Hollow Knight Silksong gets an 8.5 out of 10. It was a great game that had some flaws that, if addressed, could have easily made it a 9 for me. Still, it is an improvement in most areas than its predecessor, and that's all you can truly ask for when it comes to a sequel, especially at a $15 price point. Yes, you heard that right, $15 price point. There is a ton of value here. You get what you pay for and then some. It's fun, it's creative, it's replayable, and 100% worth the playthrough. Alright guys, there you have it. Thank you guys so much for watching the review and for supporting the channel. I really appreciate you guys tuning in. Sorry that this one took me so long to come out with. I have a newborn child that I've been taking care of with my wife. Things have been a little hectic, but I'm still here to put out good content for you guys, and hopefully you're enjoying the channel so far. Now I want to hear from you guys. What did you guys think of Hollow Knight Silksong? Was it everything you were expecting? Was it an improvement from the last game? And how do you feel about it after watching the review? Make sure to leave your thoughts in the comment section below. Don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button, and as always, be on the lookout for another video from your boy, Makina. Thanks guys. Peace.